Steam hissed across the wooden platform as Caleb Turner stepped down from the morning train. The iron wheels clanged behind him. His left hand trembled on the leather satchel he carried. A pale wedding scar circled the finger where a ring once lived. 3 years since the fever took his wife. Then a small voice pierced the noise of the station. "Papa." A little girl ran through the crowd straight toward him. Barefoot, travel dress dusty from the road, eyes bright like she had searched half the country to find him. Caleb Turner froze because he had never seen the child before, and the men stepping off the next train car meant his life was about to change forever. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. The little girl slammed into Caleb Turner's legs like a gust of wind that had learned how to run. Small arms wrapped tight around his coat. "Papa." The word hit harder than the train whistle still echoing over the platform. Caleb did not move. Steam drifted between the waiting passengers. Boots scraped wood. Somebody laughed under their breath. He looked down slowly. The child could not have been more than 3. Bare feet, dusty hem, hair tangled from travel. Her fingers clung to his coat like she had found the last solid thing in the world. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You got the wrong man." The girl shook her head against his coat. "No." Soft voice, certain voice. "I found you." People were staring now. A conductor leaned against the railcar steps. 2 ranch hands near the freight crates whispered to each other. Caleb gently pulled the girl's hands away. Not rough, just firm. "Where's your folks?" The girl pointed at the train behind him, but the passenger cars were already emptying. Travelers stepping down, carpets, bags, trunks, no one looking for a child. The station master rang a brass bell. "Next freight line clears in 10 minutes." The girl stayed where she was, eyes fixed on Caleb like the rest of the world had gone blurry. He stepped aside. She stepped with him. He turned. She followed. A shadow crossed Caleb's face. "Kid, you can't stay here." The girl lifted her chin. "I came to find you." Her voice carried the quiet certainty only children and preachers ever had. Caleb exhaled slowly. The wind pushed steam across the platform again. Cold air, coal smoke, lonely places between trains. "Name." "Lily." She said it proudly, like the name mattered. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. Around them the station was thinning, passengers leaving town, wagons creaking away. The conductor climbed back onto the train. Then Caleb noticed something else. 2 men stepping down from the last car, not travelers, dark coats, city boots, eyes searching the platform. One of them pointed, not at the town, at the girl. Caleb's shoulders stiffened. The girl saw it too. Her small hand reached for his again. "Papa." Caleb didn't answer. The men started walking toward them. Slow, confident, the kind of walk men used when they believed the law was already on their side. Caleb crouched slightly so he could look Lily in the eyes. "You know those men?" She shook her head quickly. Fear flickered there now. "They chased the train." Caleb's gaze lifted again. The men were closer, 20 yards, maybe less. One of them called out, "Sir." Too polite, too loud. The kind of voice meant for witnesses. Caleb stood. The girl pressed against his side. The station master disappeared inside his office. The train whistle blew again. Long, lonely. Caleb took Lily's hand. Her fingers were ice cold. He started walking toward the far end of the platform, away from the men. Behind them, boots quickened. "Hold there." Caleb didn't stop. Lily had to half-run to keep up. "Papa." The word came softer this time, confused. Caleb squeezed her hand once, just once. The edge of town waited beyond the tracks, horses tied near the freight yard, open prairie beyond that. Behind them the men were still coming. Caleb didn't look back again, but he knew one thing now. The girl had not chosen the wrong man, and whatever trouble had followed her onto that train had just stepped off into his life. Caleb Turner cut across the freight yard with the little girl's hand locked in his. Coal smoke rolled low over the tracks. The noon wind shoved grit against his boots. Behind him, the station noise kept going. Voices, a wagon wheel, a porter shouting about trunks, but under it all came the harder sound. Men following. Lily stumbled once on the uneven planks. Caleb caught her under the arm before she fell, light as kindling, too light. He lifted her without a word and carried her the rest of the way to the hitch rail where his horse stood tied beside a feed barrel. Buckskin gelding, broad chest, steady eyes, the kind of horse that did not scare easy. Caleb untied the reins with his right hand. The left trembled once and then steadied. Lily clung to his coat collar while he swung her up into the saddle. "Hold the horn." She obeyed at once. No fuss, no tears, just big eyes watching everything. The two men came into the yard as Caleb put his boot in the stirrup. Dark coats, town-made hats, one tall and narrow-faced, the other heavy through the shoulders. Neither had dust on them yet. They had not come far enough in life to earn it. "Mr. Turner," the tall one called. Caleb mounted behind Lily. He turned the gelding half around but did not ride off. Not yet. The man lifted a gloved hand like this was business and not trouble. "That child is to be placed under proper care." Lily went stiff in Caleb's arms. He felt it at once. Cold fear through a small body. Caleb looked from one man to the other. "Whose care?" The heavy one answered, "Company care." Nothing good ever came wrapped in words like that. Caleb rested one forearm across the saddle horn. Never heard of a company raising children. The tall man smiled without warmth. She was being escorted west to family. A misunderstanding took place. Lily twisted and buried her face against Caleb's coat. "No." Just that one word, small, sharp. The men heard it. The tall one took another step. Caleb's horse pinned its ears. Caleb's voice dropped low. "That's close enough." For a second, nothing moved. The wind tugged at the edge of the freight canvas. A telegraph wire sang overhead. Then Sheriff Thomas Hale came around the station corner, buttoning his coat. Big man, gray at the temples. Face carved by weather and long years of settling other men's problems. "What's this?" The tall man turned quick, grateful for the badge. "Sheriff, we've been looking for the child. She was entrusted to railroad supervision." Sheriff Hale looked up at Lily, then at Caleb, then back to the men, and she says. The girl lifted her head. Her cheek left a dusty mark on Caleb's coat. "They're bad." Sheriff Hale said nothing for a long moment. That silence did more work than shouting. The heavy man forced a laugh. "Children get frightened." "So do grown men," Hale said, "especially when they lie poorly." The tall one's mouth flattened. He reached into his coat and pulled out folded papers. Authority from the rail office in Denver. Sheriff Hale did not take them. "Maybe. But this is my town. She stays where I can see her until I know whose game I'm standing in." The papers stayed in the man's hand, worth less now. The heavy one glanced at Caleb like he was measuring him for future trouble. Then both men stepped back, not beaten, just delayed. That was sometimes worse. Sheriff Hale put one hand on the horse's bridle. "Take her home." Caleb frowned. "She ain't mine." Hale's eyes stayed level. "She's clinging to you like driftwood, and those fellows make my skin itch. Take her home." Caleb looked down at Lily, dust in her hair, bootless feet tucked under her, too small for all this noise. He clicked once to the gelding and rode out of town. The road to the ranch ran pale beneath the afternoon sun. Telegraph poles gave way to cottonwoods. Cottonwoods gave way to open land, fence lines, dry grass, far hills blued by distance. Lily sat quiet the first mile, then quieter. By the second, she had fallen asleep against him. Caleb kept one arm around her as the horse walked steady. She smelled like train smoke and cold wind and the faint stale cloth smell of long travel. Not like home, not yet. The ranch house stood low against the land when they crested the last rise. Weathered boards, tin roof, small barn. Water trough catching sunlight, no laughter there, no motion except the windmill turning. The place had been built for two, then grief had taken a room out of every wall. Caleb dismounted slow so he would not wake her, but Lily blinked awake anyway. She stared at the house, then at him. "This where you live?" "Oh yes." She considered it, as if houses could tell the truth from a distance. Then she nodded. "All right." The simple trust of it unsettled him more than fear would have. He carried her inside. The cabin held its usual silence. Table by the window, iron stove, lamp chimney cleaned that morning, a Bible on the shelf, and above the mantel a framed tintype turned slightly toward the room, a woman seated stiff and graceful in a dark dress, soft eyes, calm mouth. Caleb reached up as he passed and turned the frame a fraction toward the wall. Habit, fast, but Lily saw. Children saw what grown people hid in plain sight. He set her on a kitchen chair, fetched water from the crock, cut bread, sliced cold salt pork, set both before her. She folded her hands first, not for show. Just from somewhere deep in her raising, then she ate neat and fast, hungry enough to be careful. Caleb leaned against the counter and watched. "You got family." She swallowed. "My mama." "Where is she?" Lily's eyes dropped to the table. "Gone to Jesus." No tears came with it. That made it harder. The words had been used too often already. Caleb looked toward the darkened window, toward nothing, toward memory. He saw a fever lamp burning through 2 nights. A basin of cold water turned warm in minutes. A wedding ring taken from a hand gone still. He felt the old ache move under his ribs like something waking in winter. Lily looked up, not frightened now, only watching. She was 3, but something in her face held quiet older than that. "You miss her." Caleb did not answer. He went to the stove instead and fed a split log into the firebox. The cabin answered with a crackle and a breath of heat. Behind him came the scrape of a chair, small feet on the floorboards. Then Lily appeared beside the wood box carrying one stick with both hands, too big for her. She set it down near his boot. Useful, not asking permission to care, just doing it. Caleb stared at the stick a second longer than made sense. Then he took it and added it to the stove. Evening settled over the ranch in long blue shadows. He found an old pair of wool socks and folded the tops down for her feet. Too large, they swallowed her ankles. She walked the room in them anyway. He warmed water, filled the wash basin. She scrubbed her face without complaint. He gave her one of his late wife's old quilts from the cedar chest before he could stop himself. Faded green, tiny hand-stitched stars. The cloth opened a seam in him he had kept nailed shut for years. He almost took it back. Lily rubbed the quilt edge between thumb and finger. Pretty. Caleb sat in the chair by the stove and looked into the fire. A house remembered warmth even after years without it. That was the trouble with houses, they waited. After full dark, a lantern bobbed outside the window, then a knock. Sheriff Hale stepped in carrying cold air and the smell of horse sweat. He took off his hat. His eyes moved over the room, the child in the quilt on the bed, Caleb by the stove, the second plate still on the table. Something passed through the sheriff's face and was gone. "I rode by the station after you left," he said. "Those two men boarded up at the hotel." Caleb's jaw hardened, thought they might. Hale nodded. "I sent a wire to Denver, asked who signed those papers." He pulled a folded telegram blank from his pocket and tapped it against his palm. No answer yet. Lily had gone still on the bed, listening. Sheriff Hale saw that too. He lowered his voice. "There's more." Caleb waited. The station matron remembered the child arriving 2 nights ago with a woman, sick woman, kept to herself, paid cash, asked about westbound trains. He paused. Woman died before dawn in a boarding room behind Mercer's livery. The fire popped once. Lily's fingers tightened in the quilt. Caleb looked at Hale. "You tell her." Hale shook his head. "She already knows. I could see it." Lily looked down at the wool gathered in her lap. "My mama told me find Papa." The room went very still. Sheriff Hale shifted his weight. Caleb's face gave nothing away, but inside him something struck hard against old stone. "She say my name?" he asked. "No." Lily's voice was tiny. "Just Papa, the one in Wyoming, the one with the horse ranch." Hale exhaled through his nose. "There are 3 horse outfits within a day's ride. Yours is the only one near a rail stop." Caleb stood, walked to the window, looked out at the yard where moonlight silvered the trough and the fence posts. "I'm not her father." No one argued. That made the sentence lonelier. Hale came closer to the stove. "The problem is those men may not care whether you are or not." He laid the telegram blank on the table. "Until Denver answers, the child needs somewhere safe, somewhere watched, somewhere those fellows can't take her easy." Caleb kept looking out the window, past his own reflection, past the yard, past the dark. He had lived by routine for 3 years, feed at dawn, fence by noon, silence after supper, no surprises, no need, no one to lose. Behind him the cabin breathed differently now, firelight, soft rustle of a quilt, a child holding herself still so grown people could decide her future. He felt that more than he wanted to. "How long?" he asked. Hale had expected the question. "Next supply train comes in 4 weeks. I'll have an answer by then, maybe sooner. If kin are found, she goes to them. If those papers prove clean, the law decides from there." "A month," Caleb said, "or less." Caleb turned at last. Lily looked back at him with those grave little eyes. No pleading, that was worse than pleading, just waiting, like she had learned already that the world belonged to whoever stayed standing. Caleb crossed the room, knelt once so they were level, his knees cracked from the motion. A man in his 30s with a strong back and clean-shaven jaw should not have looked so tired, but grief aged a body where winters could not. "You listen good," he said. Lily nodded. "You stay here till the next train. You do as you're told. You don't wander. You don't open the door to strangers. You understand?" "Yes. This ain't forever." Her chin dipped once. "All right. No tears." No smile, just acceptance again, as if temporary kindness was more than she had expected from life. Caleb rose. Sheriff Hale picked up his hat. "I'll send Deputy Moss by tomorrow. Keep an eye on the road." He moved to the door and paused. "Caleb." Caleb looked at him. "You might not be her father." His gaze shifted briefly toward the little girl. "But right now, you're what stands between her and men I don't trust." Then he went out into the cold. The door shut. Wind pressed once against the walls and moved on. Inside, the fire threw warm light over rough boards. Lily lay down under the green quilt without being told twice. Caleb set the wooden bar across the door, checked the window latch, fed the stove one more log. Routine, but not the old routine. When he turned, Lily was watching from the bed. "Will they come here?" He stood with one hand on the stove lid. "Maybe." She tucked the quilt up beneath her chin. "You'll hear if they do." A strange look crossed her small face then, not fear, relief. She closed her eyes. Within minutes her breathing eased into sleep. Caleb stayed where he was. The cabin glowed gold around the edges and dark in the corners. Warmth and shadow, presence and silence. On the mantel the turned photograph waited. After a long while he crossed the room and set it straight again. Then he took the chair beside the door, rifle across his knees, and kept watch until dawn. Dawn came thin and gray across the ranch. Frost silvered the trough. The windmill turned slow. Caleb rose from the chair by the door with stiffness in his back and the rifle mark still pressed in his palm. The fire in the stove had burned low. Red coals, little heat. The cabin smelled of ash, coffee grounds, and old pine boards warmed through the night. He set fresh wood in the stove and worked the poker until the flames caught again. Behind him came the soft rustle of quilt cloth. Lily sat up on the narrow bed, hair wild, cheeks flushed from sleep. The green quilt pooled around her small shoulders like she had always belonged beneath it. For one long second Caleb saw another morning, another life. A woman at that same bed folding stockings into a valise for church travel. Light on her wedding band, the image struck and vanished. He turned back to the stove before it could stay. Lily slid off the bed. The wool socks he had given her were twisted at the ankles. She fixed them herself. No complaint, no asking to be carried. "You hungry?" She nodded. He poured oats into a pot and set it on the stove, fetched water from the bucket, broke yesterday's bread. By the time he turned around again, Lily had folded the quilt into a neat square at the bed's foot. Not perfect, but careful, useful. He watched her a moment, then looked away first. After breakfast, he opened the back door and cold air swept in hard enough to wake the whole room. Lily blinked into the morning. The ranch spread before her in rough lines. Barn, corral. Fence posts leaning into the wind. A world built by hands, not talk. Caleb handed her an old pair of button boots with rag strips stuffed in the toes to make them fit smaller feet. "Put those on." She sat on the step and worked at the buttons with both thumbs. Slow, determined. Caleb saddled up routine like armor, fed the gelding, checked the fence near the south pasture, brought in a split armload of wood. Each time he crossed the yard, Lily was there in some new place, beside the water pump, at the chicken run, near the barn door watching swallows dart under the rafters, never underfoot for long, never whining, only seeing, absorbing. When he carried grain to the horses, she dragged a dented tin scoop behind him and tried to lift it with both hands. Too heavy. He took half out and gave it back. She carried the lighter load solemn as a church duty. The mare in the corner stall lowered her head to sniff the child's hair. Lily stood still, did not flinch, did not squeal, just raised one hand and touched the horse's nose with grave respect. Caleb stopped in the aisle. The barn was full of warm animal breath and old hay dust turned gold by the morning light. He had not heard a child laugh in that place, not ever, but he heard something close now, a breath of wonder, small, quiet. Enough to stir the silence. By noon, the ranch no longer felt empty in the same way. That unsettled him worse than danger. The change came in little things. A cup moved closer to the stove, a second spoon on the table. A rag doll made from an old feed sack sitting by the bed after Lily fashioned it from scraps she found in the sewing drawer. Caleb had not opened that drawer in years. He had almost forgotten there was thread in it. At dinner she asked no needless questions. She only watched how he salted beans, how he cut meat, how he bowed his head once before eating though no prayer came out. Then she copied him. A habit took root between them before either one trusted the name of it. Late that afternoon, Deputy Moss rode in. Young man, narrow shoulders, eager to look useful. His horse was lathered from the pace. He brought word from town and worry with it. Sheriff Hale had received a telegram, not a full answer, only enough to darken the edges. The papers carried by the railroad men came from an office tied to Victor Langford, a railroad investor with deep pockets, Denver manners, too much interest in land that did not belong to him. Caleb stood by the corral rail while Moss talked. The sun was dropping. The cold had started to gather already in the shadow of the barn. Lily sat on an overturned bucket nearby, sorting smooth stones she had found beside the pump into careful little rows, as if order could be made by hand. Sheriff says keep your eyes open, Moss said. Langford's name has turned up in 3 land disputes west of Cheyenne. Folks lose deeds. Survey lines shift. Judges remember the wrong things after a supper in town. Caleb's mouth hardened. What's he want with a 3-year-old girl? Moss shook his head. That part's still fog, but the sheriff says where Langford reaches, money reaches first and truth comes limping behind. Lily looked up at the sound of voices but said nothing. Moss lowered his tone. Those 2 men from the station asked around again this morning, wanted to know if you'd taken the child farther west. I didn't. They know that by now. Caleb looked toward the open land beyond the pasture. Too much room out there for trouble to ride unseen. Moss shifted in the saddle. Sheriff says if you need to come into town, don't leave the child alone. Then he rode off in a clatter of hooves and dust. The ranch went quiet again, but not peaceful, not now. That evening the wind changed, sharp from the north. It carried the promise of an early snow. Caleb latched the barn tighter than usual and checked the stock twice. Lily followed with a lantern so small it barely lit the boards in front of her boots. Still, she held it level, steady. In the dim stable light she looked even younger, a child swallowed by wool and shadows. When one of the hens escaped the coop and fluttered under the wagon, Lily crouched and coaxed it out with a handful of feed. No fuss, no chase, just patience. The bird came. Caleb watched that too. Watched how the restless things settled around her, how the house breathed different when she was in it, how even the dog from Miller's spread had begun wandering over at supper hour and lying by the porch since she arrived, as if kindness had a scent. After dark, he found her asleep at the table with a stub of pencil in hand. A sheet of wrapping paper lay in front of her. On it was a crooked drawing, a square house, a tall horse, a little girl, and beside her a broad-shouldered man with no beard and straight lines for arms. He stared down at it while the lamplight flickered. She had drawn the man bigger than the house. That did something to him he did not welcome. He lifted her gently and carried her to bed. As he tucked the quilt under her chin, Lily's eyes opened a slit. "Did I help today?" The question came out sleepy, barely sound. Caleb stood there with one hand still on the blanket. "Yes." Her lashes lowered again. "Good." She slept. He remained beside the bed longer than needed. Outside, the wind worried at the eaves. Inside, the lamp cast warm amber over rough walls and worn floorboards. The house was still lonely, but it was no longer hollow. 3 days passed in labor and caution. Fence mending, water hauling, a trip no farther than the creek and back. Lily learned where she could walk and where she could not. She knew already to stop at the red-painted post near the barn, never beyond. Not alone, she obeyed. Not because she was timid, because she listened. One morning, Caleb found her sitting on the porch steps, shelling dried peas into a tin bowl with grave concentration. She had lined the split pods in a neat row like tiny boats. The rhythm of her small hands on the peas matched the rhythm of his hammer at the fence. Different work, same silence. Something close to companionship settled there. Then trouble showed itself plain. Caleb rode into town on the 4th day for flour, lamp oil, and salt. Lily rode in front of him wrapped in his old wool coat, almost disappearing inside it. The town looked as it always had. False front buildings, mud in the ruts, men in hats lingering where talk collected, but the feel of it had changed. Eyes stayed on Lily too long. Conversations stopped when Caleb passed. At Mercer's general store, Mrs. Mercer handed over the flour sack and leaned close across the counter. They were here again. "Who? You know who." Her glance flicked toward the hotel across the street. Second-floor curtains twitched and then stilled. "The railroad men," she said, and a third one with them now, smooth face, black gloves. "City coat worth more than this whole store. Folks say he came in on the late coach and took the best room without asking the price." Caleb's jaw locked. "Langford. That's the name." Mrs. Mercer's voice softened as she looked at Lily, who was standing by the cracker barrel studying a jar of striped candy without touching it. "Sheriff told me not to offer sweets where she can see, said the men might try kindness before force." Caleb looked out through the store window. Across the street, the hotel balcony stood empty, but empty places could watch too. He bought no candy. He bought a small pair of leather shoes instead, used, scuffed, but warm. Lily held them to her chest all the way out of the store like treasure she had not expected life to offer. That nearly undid him. At the livery, he tightened the saddle strap himself while the stable boy whispered to another hand nearby. Names floated through the horses, shifting and snorting. Langford, guardianship, claim, deed, money. The words moved like burrs through dry grass, catching on every passing thing. By the time Caleb turned toward home, the sky had gone hard white with snowlight. He chose the back road out of town. Less traveled, more open. He had gone a mile when he saw the rider waiting by the cottonwoods. Black coat, black gloves, good horse, still posture. Victor Langford did not look like a man of the range. He looked like a man who bought land by ruining the men on it. Clean-shaven, 40s maybe, smiled too mild to trust. He lifted his hat as Caleb reined in at a distance. Lily sat very still in front of the saddle, watching. Langford's gaze touched the child only once. That was enough. "Mr. Turner," he said, voice smooth as polished brass. "I had hoped to meet under calmer terms." Caleb said nothing. Langford folded his gloved hands over the pommel. "I understand the child has caused confusion. Unfortunate. Her welfare is my concern." Lily leaned back against Caleb's chest, not from affection now, from warning. Animals knew storms. Children did too. Caleb's hand settled near the rifle in the scabbard. Your concern reached my station with 2 hired men and bad papers. Langford smiled slightly. A misunderstanding. Paperwork often lags behind responsibility in the territories. The wind moved dead grass in pale waves around them. No other riders in sight, no witness but the cottonwoods and God. Langford continued, as if discussing cattle prices. The girl belongs in proper hands. The courts will agree. Men of your situation do not profit by standing in the path of rail interests. Caleb looked him over once, saw the expensive saddle, the clean cuffs, the unearned calm. Then he looked at the little shoes in Lily's lap, her new shoes, bought with ranch money and quiet hope. He felt something settle inside him, not rage, straighter than rage. I'm not standing in your path, he said. Not yet, Langford replied. The words hung there, cold, measured, a promise dressed like advice. Then Langford touched his heels to his horse and rode past without hurry, leaving the scent of fine tobacco and trouble behind him. Caleb waited until the man was well down the road. Only then did he breathe fully again. Lily turned her face up toward him. You don't like him? No. She looked back at the empty road. Me neither. Snow began before they reached the ranch, thin flakes at first, then thicker. By the time Caleb barred the cabin door that night, the world outside had gone white and muffled. Inside, the stove glowed red, beans simmered, wet wool steamed near the hearth. Lily sat on the rug in her new shoes, tapping the toes together to hear the sound. A child's sound, small, bright, almost enough to push back the dark. But when Caleb stepped to the window, he saw one set of fresh horse tracks at the far fence line. Not his, not the sheriff's. Someone had ridden close in the snow. Close enough to count the windows, close enough to know who slept inside. He stood there a long time with the lamplight behind him and the cold glass under his fingertips. The house was warmer now. That was true. The danger was closer too. Snow held through the night. By morning, the ranch lay under a thin white skin. Fence rails, roof edges, the water trough rimmed in ice. Caleb stepped onto the porch before dawn with a bucket of hot water and the rifle still warm from his hand. He studied the far fence line again. The tracks were there, half filled now. One rider, heavy horse, came up from the road, stopped long enough to watch, then turned back toward town. Lily stood just inside the open door wrapped in the green quilt. Small face. Serious eyes. Was it him? Caleb did not ask which him. Maybe. She nodded once, as if maybe was enough to fear. He broke the ice in the trough with the handle of the axe. The sharp crack rang across the white yard. Barn cats slipped between the posts. The gelding snorted steam into the morning. Behind him, Lily folded the quilt and set it on the bed before coming outside in her coat and new shoes. She carried a tin pail almost as large as her knees. Eggs, she said. Caleb pointed toward the henhouse, careful on the steps. She went, slow, balanced, useful. That was how she moved through the days now, like a child who had learned early that staying useful kept the world softer. By noon, the snow had turned to slush under a weak sun. Caleb patched a loose board on the windbreak while Lily sat near the barn wall with a stick, drawing crooked shapes in the mud-dark melt. The ranch sounded different in winter light. Hammer on wood, horse shifting in straw, chicken fussing, a child humming tunelessly to herself. Not much. Enough. He paused once and looked over. She was not drawing shapes after all. She was drawing a circle with a little mark at the top, again and again, then something square beneath it, then lines that crossed like tracks. Caleb drove one more nail and set the hammer down. "What's that?" Lily looked up. "My mama's necklace." His chest tightened for no good reason he could name. "You got a necklace?" She nodded and patted the front of her coat. "Pretty one. Mama said never lose it." Caleb stared a moment, then crouched in the snow-wet dirt beside her. "Show me." Lily reached under her dress collar and pulled out a thin chain Caleb had not seen before. Tucked so deep against her skin it had hidden under wool and cloth. At the end hung a small silver locket, oval, worn at the edges. Not fancy, but better made than most things carried by folks who rode west in third-class railcars. Caleb took it gently between two fingers, cold metal, warm from her skin beneath, a spray of engraved leaves on the front, and on the back, almost rubbed away, a tiny stamped mark, not initials, a symbol, crossed rails inside a circle. He had seen it once before on a survey map in Sheriff Hale's office. Railroad seal, his eyes sharpened. "Your mama gave you this." Lily nodded, said for Papa. The world seemed to go still around that one sentence, not because of the word. That had stopped shocking him days ago, because of the way she said it, not confused, not guessing, certain. For Papa. Caleb thumbed the locket's seam. It did not open at first. Years of dirt in the hinge maybe. He tried again with his pocket knife tip. The clasp clicked. Inside were no photographs, no lock of hair, only a tiny square of folded paper tucked deep in the right side, pressed so flat it might have been missed by anyone in a hurry. Caleb slid it free. Lily watched him with wide, unblinking eyes. The paper was brittle, fine quality, not store wrapping, not letter stock either, the kind used for contracts. He unfolded it carefully. Lines, legal print, a stamp. And below that, a hand-drawn boundary map small enough to fit a palm. The name at the top hit him first. Victor Langford. The next line hit harder. Transfer of right-of-way and mineral easement on parcels adjoining the North Platte Rail extension. Caleb read farther, then farther. The paper was no deed, not exactly. It was a side agreement, hidden terms, quiet terms, land to be seized if certain signatories were deceased or missing, claims to pass through appointed trustees until a child heir reached age. A child heir. Caleb read that line twice, then looked at Lily. She was 3. He looked back at the paper. A name had been written there, faded but clear enough. Elizabeth Rowan Whitfield, widow and guardian of Elena Whitfield, minor. Lily, not Lily maybe, Elena. Lily was likely what her mother called her. Caleb's jaw went hard. This was why Langford wanted her, not out of mercy, not out of guardianship. Because somewhere under this winter land, or across it, or through it, a rail line and money hung on the survival of one small girl. He folded the paper again with careful hands. Lily studied his face. Did Mama hide good? Caleb looked at her, a child's pride, a child's trust. His answer came rougher than he intended. Yes. She smiled then, a little smile, quick as winter sunlight, like she had done a useful chore. He slid the paper into his shirt pocket, reclosed the locket, tucked it back beneath her collar. "Don't show this to anyone." She touched the chain. "I know. You tell me if anybody asks about it." "I know that too." He almost asked how a child of 3 knew too much about secrecy. He did not. Some questions wounded by being spoken aloud. By mid-afternoon, he had saddled the gelding and wrapped Lily tight in blankets for the ride to town. The sky hung low and gray. The road had half thawed into ruts. He rode hard anyway. Sheriff Hale met him in the office with the smell of lamp oil and wet wool in the air. Moss was there too by the stove. Caleb set Lily on the sheriff's chair and closed the door before pulling the folded paper from inside his shirt. Hale read it once, then again slower. The lines around his eyes deepened. "Well," he said at last, "there's your answer." Moss leaned over his shoulder. His face went pale. "Good Lord." Hale lifted the paper by one corner like it might burn him. "This isn't just land pressure. This is fraud built into contract language." He tapped the map with one thick finger. "And if this child is the named heir, Langford can't lay clean hands on any of it while she lives and stays visible." Caleb stood with his hat still on and melting snow running off the brim. "So he hides her, or buries her in paperwork first," Hale said. Lily sat in the big chair swinging her small boots above the floor. She was listening, not understanding all of it, maybe enough of it. The sheriff noticed and softened his tone. "Elena Whitfield." Lily's head turned. "My mama only called me Lily." Hale nodded once. "That was her flower name for you." Lily seemed to think that over and accept it. Caleb kept his eyes on the paper. Can this stop him? Hale let out a slow breath. "It can ruin him if I put it before the right judge." He folded the document again. "Problem is, before it gets to a judge, it has to stay out of Langford's hands." A knock sounded hard at the outer office door. All three men went still. Then came a second knock. Moss moved first. Hand to revolver, Hale crossed to the window and shifted the curtain with one finger. His face changed. Too late. Caleb stepped beside him. Outside in the late afternoon slush stood Langford. Not alone, the two railroad men with him, and behind them a wagon with a driver Caleb did not know. Langford removed one glove and looked straight at the window as if he had known exactly where to stand to be seen. The sheriff opened the door halfway but kept one boot braced against it. "What do you want?" Langford's voice came in smooth and carrying. "I've brought revised custody papers and a desire to end confusion peacefully." Hale did not move. Peaceful men don't send riders to stare at ranch houses in the snow. Langford's faint smile did not bend. "Sheriff, if a child tied to rail property is being unlawfully concealed, my investors require diligence." Caleb felt Lily slip off the chair behind him. Then her small hand found the back of his coat. He did not turn. Langford went on. "The little girl's late mother was not of sound health. Her records are unfortunate. It would pain me to see a grieving child placed in unstable conditions with a rancher who has no claim." Caleb stepped into the doorway then, all 6 feet of him, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, jaw hard as split oak, 30-some years old and carrying enough grief to look older when the light hit wrong. "You got plenty to say for a man who lies with papers." The two hired men shifted. Langford's gaze settled on Caleb, cool, precise. The gaze of a man deciding where to cut. "I admire loyalty, Mr. Turner, but loyalty without law becomes kidnapping." Hale's hand moved closer to his badge as if it were a weapon. "We are done here." Langford put his glove back on finger by finger. Not quite. His eyes dipped past Caleb once, toward Lily in the shadows of the office. "Children have accidents in winter country, fires, falls, fever. Roads are uncertain this time of year." The quiet after that sentence turned dangerous. Not loud danger, worse, measured danger, threat wrapped in courtesy. Caleb took one step forward. Hale's arm barred his chest. Barely enough. Langford tipped his hat. To tomorrow, Sheriff. Then he turned and walked back to the wagon through the half-frozen mud. No hurry, no fear. That was the worst of him. He trusted the world to bend before money. The office door shut hard. Lily's fingers tightened in Caleb's coat. Hale swore under his breath. Moss checked the back window. Caleb crouched at last and faced Lily. Her face had gone pale under the wind burn. "You stay with the sheriff tonight," Hale said. Caleb stood. "No." Hale looked at him. "My office is in town. Easier to defend." "Easier to burn," Caleb said. The sheriff held his gaze, knew he was right. Night was falling by the time Caleb rode back to the ranch with Lily wrapped against him and the sheriff's warning echoing under every hoofbeat. Moss followed at a distance with a shotgun across his lap. The paper rested inside Caleb's vest now, pinned there by a safety stitch misses. Mercer had sewn in with trembling fingers before they left town. No satchel, no coat pocket, close to the heart where thieves would have to get through him first. The snow began again after dark, soft at first, then steady. Moss took first watch in the barn loft while Caleb checked every latch twice. Lily ate little supper, too tired, too frightened. He carried her to bed before the beans on his own plate had gone cold. She clutched at his sleeve when he drew the quilt up. Will the bad man come? Caleb looked at the shuttered window. The lamp threw warm circles on the walls. The stove glowed red. Outside was snow and dark and things that hunted quietly. "Not through me," he said. It was the longest promise he had made in years. Her grip loosened. She slept. Near midnight, Moss came down from the loft with snow in his hair. Nothing yet. Caleb nodded and poured him coffee gone bitter on the stove. They stood at the table in the dim kitchen while the wind scratched dry branches over the roof. Then the horses screamed. Not neighed, screamed. Both men were moving before thought caught up. Caleb seized the rifle. Moss grabbed the shotgun. The night hit like a slap when they burst onto the porch. Orange lit the yard, not dawn. Fire. The hay shed was burning hard beside the barn, flames driving sparks across the snow in a storm of red and gold. The gelding threw himself against the corral rail, white-eyed with terror. Moss ran for the horses, Caleb for the shed. Heat punched at his face. The smell came next. Burning hay, tar, kerosene. Set on purpose, he heard another sound then, not from the yard, from inside the house. A child's cry. He turned so fast his boots slid on the snow. The cabin door stood open, black against the blaze-lit yard. Open, he had barred it himself. Lily. He ran, shouldered through the doorway with the rifle half raised. The room was dark except for the firelight strobing through the windows. The bed was empty, the quilt on the floor, drawer yanked open, blankets dragged. For one terrible second the whole world narrowed to that bed. Then he heard her again, a muffled sob under the table. He dropped to one knee and reached in. Lily crawled into him shaking, clutching something against her chest so hard her little fingers had gone white. The locket, her locket. Caleb gathered her up and stood. The back window latch had been forced. Cold air cut through the room. Boot tracks marked the floorboards near the sill. Someone had come in while the fire drew every eye outside. Someone had searched the room, not for silver, not for food, for paper, for proof. Moss burst in a moment later with soot on his face. "Hay shed's gone," he said, breathless. "I saw a rider breaking south." Caleb looked at the torn room, at the child in his arms, at the locket clenched in her fist. Peace had been fragile before, now it was ash and splintered wood. He held Lily closer as the fire roared outside, and understood with sudden, final clarity. Langford was done pretending, and from this night on, the only things standing between that man and the child were a rifle, a promise, and Caleb Turner himself. By dawn, the hay shed was a black skeleton in the snow. Smoke drifted low across the yard. The smell of wet ash had worked itself into the barn boards, the porch rail, Caleb's coat. Everywhere, Deputy Moss stamped out the last orange glow with his boot heel, while Sheriff Hale rode in through the grey morning with 2 townsmen behind him. They said little at first. Men did not need many words in the face of ruin honestly made. Hale dismounted and stood in the slush, looking from the burned shed to the Pride window latched to the tracks running south beyond the fence. His mouth hardened. They meant to frighten you. Caleb stood on the porch with Lily in his arms under the green quilt. She was inside. That changed the sheriff's face. Not surprise, something heavier. He walked up the steps slow so Lily would not startle and crouched enough to see her level. "You hurt, little miss." She shook her head, but her eyes were too wide, too watchful. Night had gone into them. Hale rose again. That was no warning then. Caleb looked out over the yard. The windmill turned. The chickens scratched around blackened straw like fools unaware of evil. The geldings still shied when smoke drifted near, routine trying to continue beside violence. It offended him. "They searched the house," Caleb said. "They wanted the paper." Hale nodded once. "Then it stays nowhere. They can find it easy." Caleb shifted Lily to one arm and reached inside his vest. He pulled the folded contract free and handed it to the sheriff. Moss stared. Hale did too. "You're giving me custody of the proof." Caleb's eyes stayed on Lily. "No." He looked back up. "I'm riding in with you today." The sheriff studied him for a long second. This was not the Caleb Turner he had known these last 3 years, not the man who kept to his fence lines and answered pain with silence. This man looked awake, not calm, awake. Hale slid the paper into his own in a coat pocket. "Then we do it clean, witnesses, county clerk, church elders if needed. We put sunlight on every inch of Langford's snake pit." Caleb nodded. Lily stirred in his arms and pressed her cold nose against his neck. "You going away?" He looked down at her. For a moment, the smoke and ruin and anger all thinned before that one small question. "I'm taking you with me." She thought about that, then settled again against him. "All right." Mrs. Mercer took Lily at the store while the men crossed town, gathering what law and truth they could. The child did not cry when Caleb handed her over. That hurt worse than tears would have. She only held the front of his coat a second longer than needed. "Come back." He put a hand over hers. "I will." Then he walked out before the promise could shake loose anything else inside him. The town was already buzzing. Word of the fire had outrun the riders. Men stood outside the barber shop with their collars up. Women paused on boardwalks with baskets in hand. Eyes followed Caleb and Hale from place to place. First, the telegraph office. Then the county room behind the clerk's desk. Then the church annex, where Reverend Pike unlocked an old file chest smelling of dust and lamp smoke. Every stop pulled another thread. A surveyor's copy of the North Platte extension. A sealed complaint from 2 ranchers west of Cheyenne whose landlines had shifted after Langford money arrived. A statement from the station matron about Lily's mother boarding under her married name and fearing pursuit. Then the best piece yet. Not paper, a man. Near noon, a narrow-shouldered railroad bookkeeper named Amos Bell stepped out of the freight office, looking like he regretted being born. Ink on his cuffs, hat pulled low, hands that shook before anyone accused him of anything. Sheriff Hale took him by the elbow and guided him into the back room of the Mercantile. Caleb stood by the door. Reverend Pike sat at the table. The county clerk uncapped his pen. Bell swallowed twice before words came. Mr. Langford kept side ledgers. "Start slower," Hale said. Bell did, little by little, like a dam leaking first through pebbles. Langford had pushed contracts through Denver using shell trustees and false guardianship claims. Widows were easier to pressure, children easier still. If an heir vanished or was declared unfit or got folded into rail custody, certain parcels fell quiet into corporate control before any county judge caught scent. Bell had copied names one night after too much whiskey and too much conscience. He reached inside his coat now and produced 3 thin pages covered in cramped figures and initials. Among them, Elizabeth Rowan Whitfield, minor heir attached. Transfer pending resolution. Caleb's hand curled on the back of the chair until the wood groaned. Hale took the pages and read them in silence. Then he looked at Bell. "You'll swear this publicly." Bell turned pale as flour. "He'll ruin me." Caleb spoke then, first words he had given the man. "He'll ruin more than that if you don't." Bell looked at Caleb's face, at the smoke still ground into his coat from the burned shed, at whatever lived in Caleb's eyes now. His own dropped. Yes. By 1 o'clock the town hall bell had been rung, not for church, not for wedding, for grievance and witness. The whole town began to gather, boots on the boardwalk, voices in the cold. The hall smelled of damp wool and sawdust and the iron belly of the stove burning too hot. Farmers, storekeepers, widows, rail hands, all of them hungry for justice or spectacle, often the same thing at first glance. Caleb stood along the side wall near the front, hat in hand, shoulders squared, face unreadable. Sheriff Hale moved like a man nailing boards over a flood breach. Clark at one table, Reverend Pike at another. Amos Bell seated where the room could see him tremble. Mrs. Mercer slipped in with Lily wrapped in the green quilt and settled near the front row beside the church women. Lily spotted Caleb at once, did not wave, did not smile. She simply fixed on him as if she had tied one invisible rope from her heart to his coat and intended not to lose hold again. Then Victor Langford arrived, clean black coat, silver watch chain, 2 hired men behind him. He paused just inside the doorway and took the measure of the room with one smooth sweep of the eyes. Not rattled, not yet. He even smiled when he saw the sheriff. "I was not aware this county held legal hearings by rumor." Hale's voice carried. "This ain't a hearing. This is the part before one where honest folk decide whether a snake has fangs." A few murmurs, a few hard chuckles. Langford removed his gloves finger by finger, calm as supper company. "If my reputation is under attack, I expect the law to protect me." "The law's exactly what brought us here," Hale said. He laid the folded contract on the table, then the side ledgers, then the written statement from the station matron, piece by piece, paper made visible, truth taking shape in public air. Langford's smile changed by 1 degree, only one, enough. He stepped closer to the table and glanced over the documents without touching them. Forgery is common in rail disputes. The county clerk lifted his pen. "You'll want to say that again once I begin recording names." Langford's gaze shifted, measured distances, doors, windows, useful men in the room. Then Sheriff Hale called Amos Bell forward. The bookkeeper stood on weak knees and swore to his pages, voice cracking, sweat at his collar though the hall was cold. He named ledgers, payments, instructions from Langford's office. He named the quiet trustees, the altered filings, the way Elizabeth Whitfield's child had been marked as leverage. At that the crowd's sound changed. Not gossip now, anger, low, spreading. Langford stepped in at last. "You drunken little worm." Bell flinched. Caleb moved once. Not a dramatic move, just a shift from the wall toward the table, enough that Langford saw him, enough that Bell did too. The bookkeeper drew breath and finished stronger than before. Then Reverend Pike rose with a Bible in hand and read aloud the station matron's sworn note. A sick widow, a terrified mother, a child instructed to find the only man in Wyoming tied to a horse ranch near the rail stop. Not because he was the father, perhaps, but because he was the only decent name left in the woman's reach. That landed hard. Caleb felt it like a blow, not the father, no, something stranger, chosen. In the front row, Lily sat very still under the quilt, eyes huge, shoes dangling above the floor. Langford saw the room tipping and chose speed over charm. He straightened, voice sharpened. "This is theater. Even if the child holds a derivative claim, it belongs under rail trusteeship until adulthood. Men like Turner cannot administer." "You mean men who won't sell it back to you?" Hale cut in. A rancher from the rear stood up then. Old Jed Boone, scar across his scalp, voice like gravel. "He tried the same papers on my brother's widow in '84. Another man rose beside him, then another, a grain merchant, a survey hand, a widow from Casper whose cousin had vanished after refusing to sign a transfer. Truth was doing what force alone could not, calling witnesses out of silence. Langford looked around and for the first time understood the room had turned. He made one last reach for control. The child is in danger with Turner. His barn was burned, his property unsecured, his household unfit. At that, Lily stood up in the front row, tiny, 3 years old, quilt slipping from one shoulder. The whole room noticed because innocence rising in a crowd always changes the air. Mrs. Mercer half reached to stop her. Lily stepped clear anyway. She pointed one small finger straight at Langford. "He's the bad man." Silence fell so hard it felt like snow. No lawyer's phrasing, no county stamp, just a child and plain truth. Langford opened his mouth. Nothing came fast enough. Caleb crossed the room then, not with rage, with certainty. He bent and lifted Lily into his arms. She tucked herself against him without taking her eyes off Langford. The contrast struck every soul there. The little girl's fear, the rancher's steadiness, the polished predator facing both. Sheriff Hale took that moment and drove the nail home. Victor Langford, by authority of this county and with witness of fraud, intimidation, attempted unlawful seizure, and arson tied to your agents, I am placing you under arrest pending territorial review. One of Langford's hired men lunged for the door. Moss caught him with a shoulder and sent him sprawling into the stove rail. The other reached inside his coat and found 3 rifles already aimed his way from the back benches. Farmers, no badges, enough. Langford himself did not run. Proud men often mistook stillness for strength when really it was disbelief. Hale stepped forward with irons. Langford looked at Caleb over the sheriff's shoulder. "This is not finished." Caleb's answer came quiet. "It is for her." The irons closed, metal on bone, sound carrying clear through the hall. Something released in the room then, not joy, not yet, relief first, raw and careful, the kind that comes when a storm finally breaks where everyone can see it. By late afternoon, Langford and his 2 men were locked in the county cells with 2 deputies posted and a telegraph sent east carrying copies of everything. Snow began again outside, fine, gentle, as if the day had spent all its violence. The hall emptied slow. Voices hushed now, people passing close to Caleb and Lily with nods that held more respect than curiosity. Reverend Pike touched Caleb's shoulder once, did not speak. Mrs. Mercer wrapped fresh bread in a cloth and pressed it into his free hand. Old Jed Boone spat tobacco into the stove ash and muttered, "About time somebody stood." Caleb took Lily back to the mercantile porch as evening lowered over town. The lamps were being lit one by one, warm squares in cold windows. She sat on the bench while he pulled her little shoes straight and retied one loose lace. His big hands looked strange doing such delicate work. Lily watched him. Did we win? Caleb paused. The word was too clean for a day like this, but he understood what she meant. He looked down the street where the jail lamp glowed through snow, then back at her. Yes. She leaned against his arm, not dramatic, just trusting the world a little more than she had that morning. He stood and lifted her up. The firelight from the store windows touched her face gold. Her hand found the front of his coat where his heart beat beneath wool and ash and long habit. Around them, the town settled into evening, cold outside, warmth beginning to answer it, dark losing ground, one lamp at a time. Spring came slowly to the Wyoming plains. Snow first turned to gray slush along the road, then to cold mud, then to dark earth that smelled alive again. The burned hay shed stood half rebuilt beside the barn, new boards, fresh nails, work done by quiet hands over many mornings. Caleb Turner drove the last iron spike into the corner post while the afternoon sun warmed the yard. The hammer rang once, then again, solid sound, a sound that meant something finished. Behind him, small boots crossed the packed dirt. Lily carried 3 crooked boards stacked against her chest like treasure. She set them beside the tool crate. More wood. Caleb nodded once. Good. She dusted her hands together proudly. The ranch looked different now, not bigger, but fuller. Fence lines straight again. A fresh door on the chicken coop. Smoke rising from the cabin chimney like a promise that would keep returning each night. Lily had planted 3 crooked rows of early beans near the porch with Mrs. Mercer's help. They had not sprouted yet, but every morning she checked the soil as if life might break through by effort alone. Caleb walked to the water trough and poured the last bucket into it. The horses drank slow. Peace had come back to the land the same way spring did. Quiet, uncertain at first. Then steady. Victor Langford had been taken east 2 weeks earlier under federal warrant. Sheriff Hale rode with him to the rail depot in Cheyenne. The iron cuffs had not come off. Caleb had watched the train leave without saying a word. Some men deserved silence more than curses. The ranch gate creaked open behind him. Hoofbeats followed. Caleb turned. Sheriff Hale rode in with dust on his coat and a leather satchel slung across the saddle horn. Lily ran halfway across the yard before remembering she was supposed to stop at the red post. She skidded to a halt there. Sheriff. Hale swung down smiling. Well now. He crouched so his eyes met hers. You've grown since last week. She nodded seriously. I planted beans. Then we'd better come back for supper in a month. She liked that answer. Caleb stepped closer while Hale opened the satchel. Inside were folded papers sealed with a county stamp. He held them out. Judge signed this yesterday. Caleb did not reach for them at once. Hale waited. The windmill turned slowly behind them. Finally, Caleb took the document. The paper felt heavier than it looked. He unfolded it, read the lines once, then again slower. Guardianship granted, temporary made permanent, name written plain, Caleb Turner, legal guardian of Alina Whitfield. He lowered the paper. Lily was watching his face, waiting. He crouched down so they were level. Looks like you're staying. Her brow wrinkled. I was already staying. The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. Sheriff Hale leaned against the fence rail, satisfied. That child's land rights will be held in trust until she's grown, he said. But the ranch stays yours, always did. Caleb nodded once. The matter felt simple now. Right. Evening settled across the plains by the time Hale rode away. Golden light filled the yard. Chickens rustled into the coop. The horses turned their heads toward the barn. Lily sat on the porch steps swinging her small boots while Caleb fixed the loose hinge on the gate. Hammer, metal, wood, work that kept a place alive. When he finished, he walked back toward the house. Lily held something in her hands, a drawing on rough paper, the same crooked house, the same tall horse, the same big man, only now there were two small figures beside him, one little girl. And another smaller shape beside the porch. Beans, she explained proudly. Caleb studied the drawing, then sat beside her on the steps. The sun slid lower, prairie wind softened. Far across the fields, the new grass caught the light like thin gold. Lily leaned against his arm, warm, trusting. After a moment, she spoke. Papa. The word came natural now, not forced, not mistaken, chosen. Caleb looked out across the land that had once felt empty enough to swallow him whole. The house behind him breathed warm with firelight. The yard held the quiet sounds of animals settling. The small weight against his side changed the shape of the world. He rested his hand gently on her shoulder. Yes. She pointed toward the darkening pasture. When the beans grow, can we plant more? Caleb watched the last light fall across the ranch, across the barn, across the fence he had once believed would hold nothing but silence. Yes, he said, and for the first time in years, the ranch felt like home. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help this old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matter. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.